Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Across Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Today, DR Congo and Madagascar mark 6 decades of independence from former colonial powers. The legacy of the damaging years of European colonialism continues to weigh heavily on the development of the African nations. Also, Benin commemorates those in its history who passed through its cities as they were sold into slavery. Debate rages over whether to rename public sites who memorialize those who brutally traded in human lives. And Somalia celebrates its 60th year of independence from Italy by reopening long-shut cultural sites like its National Theatre in Mogadishu. The building was destroyed in a bombing 8 years ago. But first, as DR Congo marked 60 years of independence from Belgium, the king of the former colonial power expressed regret for the atrocities carried out in Belgian Congo at the end of the 19th century. Nicolas Chemin takes a look back at that dark chapter in DR Congo's history.
After having been colonized by the Belgians for 75 years, the Democratic Republic of Congo became independent on the 30th of June 1960 at 11 a.m. In 1885, this vast territory had become Belgian King Leopold II's private property. It's only in 1908 that it was formally a Belgian colony. In Kinshasa on Independence Day in 1960, Belgian King Baudouin I praised the work of the colonizers. Soon afterwards, the Congolese Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba responded, and he did not mince his words. He declared, "We were mocked, insulted and beaten morning, noon and night. Our wounds are still too fresh for us to drive them from our memory." For decades, the Belgians exploited Congolese workers in mines and in the rubber industry. They did so in such a cruel manner that historians say the total population fell from 20 million people in 1885 to just 10 million in 1908. Belgium says it gave Congo its independence, but in fact there had been several revolts in the years leading up to 1960. The Belgian authorities never attempted to form a Congolese elite. This meant that in 1960 very few people knew how to manage the nation's administrations. On the 5th of July, riots broke out and 2 provinces seceded. Patrice Lumumba was arrested in December and executed in January 1961. He was considered too close to the Soviet Empire, and many historians believe the CIA and Belgium were involved in his assassination. Many Congolese today believe that the country's independence was rushed and was badly prepared by the Belgians. These fragile foundations have hampered the construction of a strong, democratic and efficient state. 60 years later, Congo has huge amounts of minerals and natural resources, but most of its people still live in great poverty.
To Madagascar next, where the 26th of June 1960 marked the end of France's colonial rule there. Erin Ogunke takes a look back now at what was a bloody and tumultuous road to independence.
A look back at French news reports in the 1960s gives the impression that Madagascar's push for independence played out peacefully.
Au stade Mamasina, le président Tsiran avait remis son premier drapeau au détachement de la nouvelle armée malgache qui allait défiler devant 100 000 spectateurs. Ainsi est né un nouvel État de 592 000 km² et de près de 6 millions d'habitants.
But in reality, the path to the country's autonomy was among the bloodiest of all of France's former colonies. In 1896, the then Marina Kingdom became a part of the French colonial empire, which implemented a system of forced labor. The Malagasy uprising began some 50 years later, in March of 1947. Malagasy nationalists attacked both Europeans and locals accused of cooperating with colonizers, leaving hundreds dead. The French crackdown was brutal. That year, 30,000 additional troops were sent to the island, engaging in extrajudicial killings, torture, and burning villages. The French military even threw suspects from flying planes to terrorize the population. Historians estimate that tens of thousands of Malagasy civilians were killed. In these images, rebels are forced to hand themselves over to French authorities. In 1958, 11 years after the rebellion, the colony held a constitutional referendum. While most of the residents in the capital voted against independence, more than 77% of the population, mostly in rural areas, voted in favor. The vote took effect on June 26, 1960, restoring the former kingdom's independence.
During the Atlantic slave trade, at least 15 million Africans were uprooted from the continent to be forced into slavery in the Americas and the Caribbean. Benin saw more than 1 million people forcibly shipped out. Since the return of democracy about 30 years ago, the country's been doing more to commemorate this painful part of its history. Our team reports.
Ouidah has long kept silent. The coastal city never truly faced its past as a former slave trading port. With the end of Marxism 30 years ago, Benin began acknowledging the history of previously anonymous sites. Here, the old auction market is still named after a white Brazilian who was one of the biggest slave traders of his time. More than 1 million Africans had their liberty stripped away here.
Ceux de la diaspora verront sur les lieux, voyant ce nom, Place Chacha, ils sont frappés, ils sont touchés. Nous sommes en train de mener une lutte pour que cette plaque puisse quitter les lieux, pour qu'on puisse reconnaître officiellement que c'était en réalité l'ancienne place aux enchères.
Despite the painful past the name stirs up, some are still against renaming the square. A local development association says that nothing would be gained by removing reference to the city's biggest slave trader, who was also an influential political figure in the ancient kingdom of Abomey.
Qu'il ait fait du bien ou qu'il ait fait du mal, on ne réécrit pas les pages de l'histoire. Il va falloir immortaliser tous ceux qui ont pris une part de responsabilité quand même dans l'histoire de l'IA.
Since the 90s, the journey taken by thousands of chained Africans has been part of a historical tour. At the end of this road is a warehouse that was used to keep men and women before their departure. It was the last stop before they left their home continent forever. Jeffrey comes from a family of boatmen. His forefathers carried captives to the waiting slave ships. He often comes here to meditate.
Nous étions obligés d'amener les esclaves dans les pirogues vers les bateaux négriers, sinon on est décapité.
Many Beninese still today commemorate their ancestors. The region east of present-day Benin paid a heavy price for the transatlantic slave trade. Before being forced onto ships, most African captives would have followed the voodoo religion. Recently, some believers opened up about a secret aspect of their worship.
La tradition vaudoise choisit d'imprimer cette mémoire à travers la peau des adeptes ici. Par exemple, c'est l'ancêtre d'Arsona qui a été déporté. Quand nous allons effectuer les cultes qu'il faut, ces adeptes pourront réciter le nom des milliers d'ancêtres qui ont été déportés et dont les noms sont imprimés sur leur corps.
The number of ceremonies evoking the memories of deported Africans have increased over the past 30 years, in part driven by tourists from the diaspora in search of their ancestral identity.
Somalia has reopened its national theatre in Mogadishu. 8 years ago, it was destroyed by a suicide bomber. The city stadium was also restored to mark 6 decades of independence. Take a look.
It has been a busy week in Mogadishu. The country held celebrations to mark the 60th anniversary of its independence from Italy. After 1991 and the overthrow of Siad Barre's military regime, Somalia plunged into chaos. In recent years, the situation has improved, but al-Shabaab jihadists still carry out regular attacks. The celebrations for the anniversary took place in the National Theatre, which only reopened a few days ago. It hopes to put on shows soon.
wax cabsi abniya oo maanta tiyaatarka gudihiisa shubay la joogana ma jiro laakiin waxa naloo ka baahay taxadar waxa taxadaraya ciidanka amniga oo nooc walba leh annaga taxadarayna ilaahay baanu tala saaranaynaa inuu nabadgeliyo.
The theatre was opened in 1967. During the Civil War, its roof collapsed as clan-based warlords fought over it. In 2012, it was rebuilt, but 2 weeks after its opening, it was destroyed once again by a suicide bombing. This symbol of culture in the heart of the city hopes to last longer this time. Another major building that reopened this week is the National Stadium. It had served as a base for al-Shabaab and later for African Union peacekeeping troops.
dareenkeena lama qiyaasi karo weligay ma aan arag dhalinyaro ama garoon kan oo la furan ama shaqaynaya muddo dhowr iyo 10 sano baan anigu xamar joogay.
When al-Shabaab controlled Mogadishu, they had banned all sporting events. The reopening of the stadium and the theatre are signs of hope in a city that has witnessed so much suffering.
The mysterious deaths of hundreds of elephants in Botswana has saddened and baffled scientists. An unusually high number of elephant carcasses was first noticed in early May. Some may find the footage in the following report upsetting. Pierre Delroux tells us more.
Over 350 elephants found dead in the past 3 months, all in Botswana's famed Okavango Delta. Some carcasses were discovered clustered around waterholes. Others appear to have died falling flat on their faces.
It seemed they were even dying, very suddenly in some of the cases. The carcasses were animals that had fallen down while walking.
Botswana is home to 130,000 African elephants, the world's largest population. The Delta alone is home to some 15,000 individuals. Last year, the government scrapped a 5-year elephant hunting ban, sparking international outcry. But poaching seems to be ruled out as the cause of these recent deaths.
We think at this juncture is not poaching because all the carcasses that have been identified are identified intact with ivory.
3 laboratories in Canada, South Africa, and Zimbabwe have been asked to process samples taken from the bodies. For now, the investigation seems to have ruled out natural anthrax poisoning, which killed at least 100 elephants in Botswana last year.
One of the likely candidates at first was anthrax, which is common in Botswana, but it's the wrong time of year for that. So that has been ruled out. And that we did have an outbreak in November of last year. And I'm sure the avenues being investigated are likely to be a bacteria infection or indeed a virus.
The African elephant is classified as vulnerable in the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Red List. A Pan-African survey conducted in 2016 revealed that between 2007 and 2014, elephant numbers plummeted by at least 30%.
Well, that's it for Across Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.